Hello, my name's Audrey Scanlan. I'm the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Central Pennsylvania. I'm making this video on the 14th of July in the year 2022. You will be viewing it on the 15th of July in the year 2022. I'm just back from a few days at General Convention. As you know, our General Convention was shortened from a 10-day or 2-week extravaganza down to 4 days of legislation, and we had a wonderful time. We did a lot of hard work, and I look forward to sharing that with you. I know many of you were following along as we had live streams from both the House of Deputies and the House of Bishops. You could watch us as we did our work. There were summations every day put out from the Episcopal News Service, and all of that you could locate from our website for the diocese. I'm sure many of you did follow, and thank you for your prayers. And I'm especially grateful to our deputation who worked so hard. It was a lot of morning, afternoon, and evening sessions that we put in to consider more than 400 different resolutions. And so today I'd like to talk with you about one resolution that we passed, because it was a matter of weighty and lengthy debate in the House of Bishops, and I think an important resolution for us in the Episcopal Church. Now, many have come to criticize some of the work that we did, saying that it was about rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, that we really need to be addressing issues of spiritual and congregational vitality in the Episcopal Church. But the truth is that we did stick to some of our core interests. One among them that I'll talk with you today about is our beloved Book of Common Prayer. The committee that is responsible for bringing legislation to convention about the prayer book presented a resolution. I have a little cheat sheet here. Presented a resolution A059, and it called for the identity of the Book of Common Prayer to be expanded, so that what we're talking about when we say the Book of Common Prayer is not just something like this, but could be also a curated collection of texts to include other authorized rites from the Church. That resolution was quickly, a substitute resolution was offered by a different bishop. B011 was the title of that, or the number of that resolution, that called for a more intentional and deliberate way to decide what the identity of the Book of Common Prayer is, and also to be more mindful about how it is that we incorporate new liturgies into the Book of Common Prayer. So let me just stop at this point and say that many of us, me included, when we say the Book of Common Prayer, this is what we're thinking about. And I brought some books of common prayer to show you from my own collection, because I am a lover of books, and I'm a lover of the Book of Common Prayer. And so in my own collection at home, I brought a few of them. I have a whole series of small prayer books that have been handed down to me in my family through the years. Because, when you're cleaning out your attic, what better to do than give the priest in your family your old heirloom prayer book? So I have several of these. I also have, to show you, a version of the 1928 prayer book, which was given to me on the day of my confirmation on May 17th, on Whit Sunday, or Pentecost, May 17th in the year 1970. This is what we refer to now as the old prayer book, the 1928 prayer book. I have this prayer book, which you've seen from time to time in my videos. It's a prayer book that my mother gave to me, and when the 1979 prayer book, this one, came out, the church that we attended in Connecticut had a sale of prayer books, and so my mom bought one for each of her children, and you can see this is held together now with duct tape, but I treasure this book because my mom gave it to me. So I use this frequently for my personal devotion. And then there's this behemoth of a book that simply says on the spine, prayer. And I was looking through this book this morning in my office. It is an illustrated Book of Common Prayer, the first prayer book in our country from the year 1789. So this was the first American Book of Common Prayer, because remember, we used to pledge allegiance to the crown in the early days, but in 1789 we had our first American prayer book. And so this is a book with beautiful, beautiful woodcuts and some rites that we don't have in our prayer book anymore. There's a rite for baptism of people at of a ripe age. There's a rite in here for baptism of children in private homes, which we don't do anymore. There's a section of prayers for people at sea. So there's a whole bunch of interesting prayers. It's fun to go through that. But our prayer book has changed through the years, and while we love and revere the physical book itself, what we have found as our Episcopal Church has changed and grown in accepting new forms of liturgy and new rites, such as the blessing of same-gender weddings and the marriage rite for same-gender weddings, that those aren't in this book. And so as we think about expanding the definition of the Book of Common Prayer, we're not in a position to do a wholesale renovation right now on this book, but we would like to honor those rites that have brought us into a more contemporary time and are more inclusive of people in our church, such as same-gender couples. And so what we've decided to do, this is a long way of explaining the end of this debate that we had in the House of Bishops, is we've decided, another bishop came forward after consulting with members from the House of Deputies, and they provided another resolution, a substitute resolution to be considered. And here's what they offered. What they offered is that the Constitution of the Episcopal Church, we think of Bishop Andy Doyle from Texas, said it's really the container in which we do our work, the Constitution. And so this new resolution offered that we would consider an amendment to Article 10 of the Constitution, which defines the prayer book as a book, and that we would consider that the prayer book itself could be an entity which includes a book, but also other authorized rites, and that these rites would be authorized not just by a vote of convention, but through a process of trial use and a vote of convention. Now, this amendment to the Constitution takes 2 votes of convention, so it will be some time before we make that happen. But this was approved unanimously in the House of Bishops and then moved forward to the House of Deputies. I'd like to read to you from the preface of our prayer book, and this was written in 1789, the preface of our first prayer book, because it's important. It talks about how it is that we regard liturgy and prayer books and our identity as people of faith who hold the Book of Common Prayer dear, how we regard that. So this was written in 1789. The same church has not only in her preface, but likewise in her articles and homilies, declared the necessity and expediency of occasional alterations and amendments in her forms of public worship. We find accordingly that seeking to keep the happy mean between too much stiffness in refusing and too much easiness in admitting variations in things once advisedly established, she hath, in the reign of several princes, since the first compiling of her liturgy in the time of Edward VI, upon just and weighty considerations her thereunto moving, yielded to make alterations in some particulars, as in their respective times were thought convenient, yet so as that the main body and essential parts of the same have still been continued firm and unshaken. And so back in 1789, even back then with the publication of our first American prayer book, we realized that there would be from time to time the necessity to alter how it is that we pray in our personal devotions and in our common life as well. So that's a lot of long, confusing conversation maybe about something that is perhaps trivial to some of you, because the book in the pew is not going away, but it is also very, very important to those for whom inclusivity in our church, and I think that would be most of us, is a very important marker and threshold for who we are as Anglicans and Episcopalians. So we will look forward to voting on that constitutional amendment again at our next convention as we move forward, making this container of the Constitution something that can then hold within it changes to the canons about how it is that we accept and revise and try on and finally approve new liturgies for our church. So the book's not going anywhere, but we are excited about finding a new way forward for church in these changing times. So until next time, friends, in which I will be in England. I'm going to the Lambeth conference, not I guess next week, but the week after that. So I've got one more video with you before I head off to England for our International Anglican Conference across the Anglican Communion. So I'll see you next week and tell you a little bit about what you can expect while I'm away for 2 weeks in England, what you'll be hearing from me for that. So God bless you. My prayer is that God will bless you and guide you and keep you always.